The line went dead. A static hum filled the void, but the bank officer's voice remained etched in my mind, reverberating like a haunting melody. "They can't finalize the sale without your signature, but it appears they tried anyway." The words twisted like a knife, and I stared at the screen, the flickering cursor mocking my disbelief. The cold fluorescent lights of my temporary office cast a harsh glow, illuminating the sweat on my brow as a knot formed in my stomach, tightening with every heartbeat. Before I tell you how we arrived at this precipice, let me rewind to a time when everything felt predictable, even comforting. My family had unwritten rules, unspoken codes about loyalty and trust. In our household, my father's voice resonated with authority, a steady drumbeat that provided a rhythm to our lives. A veteran, he exuded a sense of discipline that was both admirable and suffocating. His expectations loomed over us like the shadow of a mountain, unyielding and immense. I was the elder sibling, the one who grasped the concept of responsibility tightly, while my brother, 3 years my junior, danced in my shadow, eager to prove his worth. He was ready to bend and sway in ways I wouldn't have contemplated, all in the name of belonging. It was easy to think I understood him, but perhaps I merely assumed that loyalty and self-interest were intertwined threads in our familial tapestry. When I deployed, I carried the weight of my commitment with me, believing that those I trusted at home would honor the boundaries we never verbally defined. The house, our home, bore the scent of pine cleaner, mingled with the faint aroma of old books and the comforting warmth of morning coffee. It was a sanctuary built from countless paychecks, overtime deployments, and sacrifices that often went unnoticed. I left it in what I thought were safe hands, cameras installed more for peace of mind than paranoia, silent sentinels, witnessing the quiet rhythms of my life I would miss. In my last conversation with Dad, I had gently outlined minor maintenance tasks, passing in the keys with a gesture of shared duty. It felt like an exchange steeped in trust, the unshakable certainty that family meant standing by one another. Yet, shadows lurked. Signs I had failed to notice flickered like distant stars. My brother's words about opportunities danced in the air, laden with an undercurrent of something unspoken, a plan quietly taking shape beneath our casual exchanges. And there was Dad, always steady, his silence often louder than his words, leaving me with an unsettling feeling of doubt. The days blurred into a haze of duty, my mission unfolding far away, while a storm brewed closer to home. I had always believed in the strength of our family ties. Yet, as I sat there, remnants of the life I thought I understood began to crumble. My heart raced, not just with anger, but with a profound sadness. The conflict between blood and betrayal loomed large, threatening to engulf everything I had fought for. Then came the moment of clarity, a spark igniting the darkness. I realized that my love for my family would guide me, not as a chain binding me to their choices, but as a light illuminating the depth of my own integrity. I could confront the reality with courage. I could reclaim my life and my home without losing the essence of the family I had known. I reached for my phone, the weight of the decision heavy in my hands. I was ready to stand firm, to challenge the unspoken codes that had led us into this chaos. With a deep breath, I dialed my brother's number. The line rang, and with each tone, I felt a surge of determination. I would not let fear dictate the terms of my family's legacy. In that moment, amidst uncertainty, I found a sliver of hope, a path towards resolution that would bind us not in silence, but in an honest conversation about trust and responsibility. Family could still mean something beautiful, but it would take a willingness to confront the shadows together. In the delicate hush of early morning, I stood in my home, a sanctuary woven from years of careful routines and unspoken loyalty. The sharp tang of coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of pine from the freshly waxed floors, a smell I had infused into the very fibers of our living space just the night before. Sunlight streamed through the open windows, casting warm golden stripes across the polished hardwood, illuminating the quiet confidence I had built within these walls. I had always believed that my father's presence, though often absent, was a shield, a calm authority that would prevent chaos from breaching our lives. Family loyalty to me seemed an unbreakable bond, a solemn promise that we would always respect the boundaries we had implicitly set. Yet reflecting on my life, I began to unravel the truth. What I had perceived as steadfastness was in fact a blind spot, a dangerous naivety that left us vulnerable to unseen threats. As I prepared for another deployment, a twinge of unease whispered in the back of my mind. I had always been disciplined, the kind of person who observed more than reacted, internalizing rather than speaking out. This disciplined demeanor had seen me through high-stakes missions and long stretches of isolation, but it offered no defense against the subtle manipulations of those who thrived in the shadows of our family's trust. I remember the moment I packed, the echo of my footsteps resonating in the hallway like a heartbeat, each step a reminder of the home I cherished. There was a brief, flickering thought, a nagging instinct, that I should leave written instructions, a reminder to double-check our shared responsibilities. But I dismissed it, convinced that the silent understanding we all had, the unspoken rules of loyalty and duty, would suffice. With a final glance at the kitchen, where the coffee pot gurgled softly and the sunlight danced on the surface, I felt a swell of pride. I had constructed an order within this house that I believed was unassailable. The front door clicked shut behind me, the familiar creak of the hinges I had oiled countless times settling into my memory. I stepped into the crisp morning air, a sense of calm wrapping around me like a cloak, unaware of the storm brewing in my absence. Days turned into weeks as I navigated the chaos of duty, distant from the warmth of home, yet tethered to it through memories and trust. But as I returned, eager to find my sanctuary unchanged, I would discover that the very foundations I had relied upon, the trust, the loyalty, the discipline, were as fragile as glass, easily shattered by the weight of ambition and deceit. The sound of my footsteps echoed differently in the hallway, a haunting reminder that the familiar could be irrevocably altered in the blink of an eye. I opened the door to chaos, the serene image of my home replaced by a cacophony of betrayal. I had trusted my family to honor our unwritten code, but life had a way of revealing the cracks hidden beneath the surface calm, exposing motivations I could never have anticipated. In that moment of realization, the emotional weight pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I had assumed that love would protect us, but I learned that trust is only as strong as those who uphold it. And as I stood amidst the remnants of what once was, I understood that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not in the outer world, but within the confines of one's own home. It all began with small gestures, subtle deviations that danced just beneath the surface of normalcy. A question asked too casually about the value of the house, a reference to taking care of things, a glance shared between my father and brother that seemed laden with unspoken meaning. Individually, they felt insignificant, but together they formed the quiet drumbeat of something ominous brewing beneath the surface. I had always thought, they wouldn't cross this line. They know me. They know the rules. That assumption, wrapped in trust, became my blind spot. I remember the moment it shifted, when the steady rhythm of my life was disrupted by an unexpected intrusion. I was halfway across the world, the sterile hum of air conditioning blending with the distant chatter of soldiers in the barracks, when I checked my personal email during a rare moment of respite. A notification blinked at me, small and unassuming. Your house listing has been updated. I froze, my eyes locked onto the words, hope flickering like a dying flame. I hadn't authorized anyone to list the house, not my dad, not my brother, not anyone. My fingers hovered uncertainly over the keyboard, a storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. Maybe it was an error, a glitch in the real estate system. I clicked through, heart pounding, and was met with images of familiar rooms, the very essence of my life, carefully crafted over the years, now being marketed to strangers. The realization hit me, a cold wave of doubt crashing over my certainty. I recalled the seemingly innocent remarks from my brother about checking on things, the offhand comment about getting the house ready for you, and I understood then that they were not as benign as I had once believed. Instead, I resolved to investigate further, to gather the threads of information before jumping to conclusions. My mind spun with a question that lingered in the air. Had they truly gone this far? Days later, my neighbor's calm voice reached me through the phone, but her words struck like a hammer. They've been showing your house, she said, almost too casually. Several times. Are you selling? A chill crept down my spine as I processed her words. My home, a sanctuary that held my memories, was now being paraded before strangers, stripped of its meaning, its warmth. Anger surged within me, fueled by a sense of betrayal. How could they? The very people I trusted were crossing boundaries I thought were etched in stone. In that moment, I realized this was more than a simple misunderstanding. It was a fracture in our family's foundation. The house was more than a building. It was the keeper of our shared history, a testament to the laughter, tears, and countless moments that stitched us together. The conflict within me grew like an insatiable fire, demanding resolution. I took a deep breath, letting the heat of betrayal cool into determination. I would confront them, not with accusations, but with a desire to understand. I would bring my anger into the open and unravel this knot of confusion that had been allowed to fester in silence. As I prepared to return home, I steeled myself, knowing this would be a reckoning. The love, discipline, and unwavering belief in family that once felt unshakable now hung precariously in the balance, waiting for the right words to either mend the rift or deepen the divide. The journey home was fraught with uncertainty, the weight of unanswered questions heavy on my heart. But as I stepped back into the familiar embrace of my house, perhaps confronting the truth would not only reveal the motivations behind their actions, but also restore the bond we had almost lost. And so, I took that first step into the heart of our home, ready to confront the shadows and fight for the love that had once illuminated every corner. In the dim light of my small apartment, a sense of unease began to crawl through me like an insistent whisper. I could hear the faint rustle of paper on the other end of the line, an everyday sound that starkly contrasted the turmoil brewing within me. I swallowed hard, the thickness in my throat making my voice tremble as I attempted to maintain composure. I haven't authorized anyone to show it, I replied, though the disbelief was evident even in my carefully measured tone. On the other side, she hesitated, and the silence felt heavy, stretching painfully before her words finally broke through. Well, I thought maybe you knew. The uncertainty in her voice pierced through the fog of confusion, leaving a tight knot in my stomach. Something was happening in the shadows of my trust, lurking in the spaces I had always assumed were secure, and it felt far more sinister than a simple misunderstanding. I needed to see for myself. That's when I remembered the camera I had installed before leaving, an inconspicuous little device, nestled in the corner of my living room, initially a tool of reassurance rather than suspicion. My fingers danced over my phone screen, accessing the footage remotely. As the screen flickered to life, a dim glow illuminated my living room, and dread pooled in the pit of my stomach. What I saw sent a chill of disbelief coursing through me. My father and brother moved through the rooms with an unsettling familiarity, their voices low yet deliberate as they discussed asking prices and potential buyers like they were planning a casual family dinner. The quiet click of the tablet against the table punctuated their conversation, each gesture and nod drawing me deeper into a scene I never wished to witness. I sat there, silent and frozen, recording everything. Every detail seemed to matter more than the last. The way my brother's eyes lingered on the contract papers, carelessly left on the countertop. The way my father's hand rested on the table, calm yet authoritative, as if his mere presence legitimized the entire conversation. It was a scene that should have been peaceful, but now felt like a betrayal unfolding in real time. Then, as if the universe wanted to taunt me further, I caught sight of a contract draft lying on the counter, subtle yet ominous. A single sheet of paper, scrawled signatures, and an unfamiliar note in handwriting that made my heart race. My pulse quickened, anxiety gnawing at me. I couldn't decipher if it was real, forged, or partially completed, but it confirmed a boundary had been crossed. This wasn't oversight or miscommunication. They were treading on territory that belonged to me. I began meticulously documenting everything, a process that felt almost like preparing for battle. Screenshots of the tablet, timestamps from the camera, notes of whispered conversations, all became part of my new reality, each piece a testament to the violation of trust. As I watched their interaction unfold, the weight of betrayal settled heavily in my chest, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. I was filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow, knowing that the very people I relied on had stepped into a realm of secrecy that felt like a jagged knife in the back. None of this felt right, and yet, as I documented their every move, I knew I was preparing for a confrontation I never wanted. My heart pounded in rhythm with the clicks of the camera, each sound a reminder that the world I thought I knew was unraveling before my very eyes. In the dim light of her home office, Ava sat surrounded by a fortress of files and screens, the glow of her laptop illuminating her determined face. The air was tinged with the rich aroma of cold coffee, remnants of her late-night vigilance. Each document was meticulously labeled, an army of organization against the chaos that threatened her world. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, a nagging anxiety that whispered, what would they do next? And would it be stopped before it was too late? Taking a deep breath, she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the realtor. The line connected, and she steeled herself, her voice steady yet laced with tension. I haven't authorized any sales, she declared, letting the weight of her words linger. Silence enveloped the call, thick and suffocating, before the realtor's vague reassurances trickled through, like water slipping through her fingers. He mentioned tentative interest and paperwork being prepared, each syllable puncturing her resolve. Ava could hear the rhythmic tapping of keyboards in the background, a symphony of silent negotiations moving forward without her consent. The reality of her situation settled over her like a shroud, transforming her unease into a fierce determination. This wasn't just about a house. It was a battle for control, a fight against the tide of decisions being made in her absence. A sense of betrayal tightened around her chest. Each casual comment from her father, every eager suggestion from her brother, even her neighbor's casual awareness, now felt like pieces of a treacherous puzzle assembled without her. As she pieced together the pattern, a familiar dread crept back into her mind. Would the contract be signed? Would the house be sold before she could intervene? The questions echoed relentlessly, each one sharper than the last, prodding at her resolve. She could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, a steady reminder of the calm facade she was desperately trying to maintain. Late into the night, Ava became a detective in her own home, cross-referencing footage with messages, emails, and any scrap of information she could gather. The beeps of notifications felt like alarms, urging her to remain vigilant. She noted patterns, times of day, gestures, and subtle phrasing, each detail adding another rung to the ladder of proof she was building. Her emotions, however, remained a distant undercurrent. Not yet angry, but methodical, her mind sharp and calculating. The stakes were rising, and with each passing moment, her resolve hardened. She understood the urgency of her mission. This was not merely about a listing. It was a battle to reclaim her narrative, to confront her family, and to assert her presence in a world that seemed to be moving forward without her. As the shadows danced on her walls, Ava knew she had to act, before the open loop tightened into inevitability. Each tick of the clock resonated like a heartbeat in the dimly lit room, where the soft glow of the computer screen cast shadows that danced across the walls. I sat hunched over my laptop, fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled through the endless stream of evidence unfolding before me. With every screenshot and email I uncovered, another layer of uncertainty unfurled, forcing me to remain vigilant, to anticipate the next move in this precarious game. The air was thick with tension, a palpable weight that made it hard to breathe. By the end of the second week, the pieces of this unsettling puzzle lay scattered across my digital workspace, and the realization hung heavy in my chest. Escalation was inevitable. The first small boundary had been crossed. My brother, someone I once trusted implicitly, had begun to manipulate my name and intentions without my knowledge. My heart sank as I recalled the innocent beginnings of this twisted tale. A few casual texts about real estate, a conversation that had somehow morphed into deceit. I felt the flicker of panic surge through me as I scoured my emails, finding messages allegedly from me, each one a fabrication, a betrayal dressed in the guise of legitimacy. The headers were wrong, the formatting slightly off. It was a carefully orchestrated ruse, and the realization that I had been pulled into this web of deceit stung sharper than I anticipated. I could almost hear my pulse hammering in my ears as I prepared to send the documents to a lawyer, encrypting every file and video, knowing that professional validation would be vital if this spiraled into a legal nightmare. Each click of send echoed in the silence, accompanied by the low hum of the barracks around me. The camera footage became my lifeline, an unalterable testimony to the truth I desperately needed. I replayed the videos endlessly, honing in on the minutiae, the subtle shift of my father's hand resting on a contract, the way my brother gestured toward the tablet screen, the almost imperceptible nods that seemed to seal my fate. These gestures, so small yet so telling, marked a silent agreement, an understanding that I had never sanctioned. As the days blurred into one another, I felt the weight of betrayal seep deeper, igniting a fire within me that I couldn't extinguish. I was more than an observer. I was a guardian of my own narrative, determined to unveil the truth. My resolve hardened. I would not allow a breach of trust to go unchallenged. I would document every infraction, every deceitful email, every fabricated text, until I constructed an undeniable case against my brother. The conflict loomed larger, and I prepared for the moment when I would confront him, armed with irrefutable evidence and a heart full of disappointment. The emotional toll of this journey pressed down on me, yet with every piece of evidence I gathered, I felt a flicker of hope. I could take back my narrative. I could reveal the truth at the moment it mattered most. As I collected my thoughts, the camera became not just a tool, but a symbol of my resilience, my unwillingness to be a victim in this tangled web of deceit. I could feel the storm building, and though the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, I was ready to stand my ground and reclaim the trust that had been stolen from me. In the dim light of twilight, shadows danced across the walls of the old house, a sanctuary turned battleground. I stood at the threshold, feeling the air thicken with an unsettling tension. The familiar creaks of the floorboards felt foreign, almost accusatory, as I observed them moving with an unsettling ease. My father and brother, the very guardians of our home, now seemed like intruders. Their presence was chilling, an audacious claim to a space that was steeped in memories and love, transforming into a landscape of betrayal. The realization washed over me like a cold wave. This wasn't simply a careless mishap, it was a calculated maneuver. As I watched from a distance, the first thread of doubt unraveled in my mind. Had they forged signatures? Would the bank catch on before they could finalize their machinations? The uncertainty gnawed at me, a relentless weight that pressed down upon my chest, robbing me of sleep and peace. Determined to reclaim my narrative, I began to weave a tapestry of evidence, each thread meticulously placed. The first layer was alerts, emails pinging like ominous raindrops, notifications swirling like storm clouds, whispers from neighbors that echoed with suspicion. Next came the paper trail, contracts and drafts, each line scrutinized under a magnifying glass of distrust. I could almost hear the pages rustling in protest, revealing secrets they had tried to conceal. Then there were the timestamps, screenshots and camera footage, each one a digital heartbeat of the unfolding drama. My heart raced with each revelation, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts, a lawyer confirming irregularities, a bank officer quietly nodding at procedural violations. Layer upon layer of proof emerged, each one solidifying my resolve, yet deepening the fracture in my heart. My family, my own flesh and blood, were not merely negligent. They were orchestrating a scheme, their actions a betrayal that lodged like a splinter in my soul. As the days drifted by, the pressure mounted. The realtor's tentative communications felt like a cruel joke, each message a reminder that my objections fell upon deaf ears. They navigated the waters with a confidence that made my stomach churn. Their discussions about buyers and prices, a bitter melody that played in the background of my thoughts. I found myself tracking every detail, timing responses with precision, tracing their digital footprints as if I were a detective unraveling a mystery. Each new notification became a heartbeat in this escalating narrative of deceit, and I replayed the footage again and again, capturing the subtle nuances, my father's voice lowering conspiratorially, my brother's tone oozing with a familiarity that was unsettling. I meticulously constructed folders and charts, timelines stretching across my desk like a battle plan, each clue cross-referenced, every piece of evidence a reminder of what was at stake. Yet, as I delved deeper into this abyss, a heavy sorrow settled in my chest, a grief for the family I once knew, for the trust that had been shattered. I stood at the edge of an inevitable confrontation, a storm brewing within me as I realized that the family system I had believed in was crumbling. Beneath the layers of betrayal, a flicker of hope remained. I would not allow their actions to define me, nor would I let this house, once filled with love, become a tomb of shattered dreams. With renewed determination, I prepared myself for the confrontation that awaited, ready to reclaim not just my home, but the very essence of my family. The journey ahead would be fraught with emotion, but I could no longer remain a passive observer in a story that was unmistakably mine. In the dim light of the late afternoon, shadows stretched across my living room like creeping vines, curling around each piece of furniture, each silent witness to the unraveling drama of my life. The air was thick with an electric tension, a weight that pressed against my chest, yet there was an odd tranquility in the meticulous process I had taken on. I could almost hear the rhythmic tick of my heartbeat, a steady drum that accompanied my focused thoughts as I delved deeper into a world of deceit and betrayal. The urgency of my situation had driven me to reach out to an array of professionals, bank officers, legal advisors, even neighbors who had unwittingly become part of this intricate web. Each conversation felt like pulling taut a string that would eventually guide me toward a confrontation, a showdown I desperately needed to win. As I documented their statements, I could feel my own resolve solidifying, each acknowledgement a small victory, each piece of information a rung on the ladder I was constructing to climb above the chaos. But the stakes were rising, and doubt gnawed at me like a persistent specter. Would the forged emails I'd collected be enough for the bank to take action? Could my father see the truth behind the veil of his trust, recognize that the evidence I had meticulously gathered could not simply be dismissed? The thought of the transaction proceeding without my intervention was as chilling as it was motivating. I was a quiet storm, gathering my forces while the world around me seemed to spiral further from my grasp. Then, one fateful afternoon, everything shifted with a simple flicker on my screen. A partial signature appeared on a contract draft, almost ghostly in its subtlety, but tangible enough to ignite a firestorm of adrenaline within me. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of clarity that surged through my veins. They were moving forward, assuming my absence was a green light, a tacit allowance of their treachery. The audacity of their confidence stoked the embers of my fury, setting my mind racing as I replayed the footage, dissecting the sequence. Tablet open, documents sprawled on the counter, a casual conversation laced with tension, and that pause, a conspiratorial glance shared between them that spoke volumes. Each day became an exercise in patience and strategy. I meticulously crafted a timeline, a digital tapestry woven from emails, messages, recorded conversations, each thread vibrant with detail, each annotation a mark of my growing clarity in a murky situation. My father, once a pillar of calm authority, now appeared a figure shrouded in ambiguity, his eagerness suddenly alarming. My brother's charm, which had once disarmed me, now took on an unsettling edge. Yet, I kept my composure, observing with the precision of a hawk, calculating each move in this high-stakes game, allowing the narrative to build towards the inevitable confrontation, the moment I knew would define everything. As I prepared for the showdown, I could feel the weight of my resolve. It was a quiet strength, forged in the fires of betrayal, and I was determined to emerge unscathed. In the heart of chaos, I found my calm, ready to reclaim the narrative of my life, to confront the shadows that had begun to encroach upon my world. This was my story to tell, and I would not let it slip away into the night. The final open loop hung in my mind like a storm on the horizon, a relentless question that gnawed at my insides. Would they realize I had the evidence before it was too late? My heart raced with the tension, the weight of uncertainty pressing down like the thick, humid air before a thunderstorm. The meticulous layering of proof and observation, the screenshots, the emails, the hidden camera clips, coalesced into a slow-boning crescendo, a narrative that demanded a decisive turning point. I paced the room, the familiar scent of polished wood and faint hints of coffee swirling around me. By the end of this stage, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, that the transaction could not proceed without my intervention, and second, that my confrontation would need to be surgical, undeniable, and public enough to serve as both a social and official payoff. My house, my hard-earned investment, and the boundaries I had set were all at stake. And every observation was a step up a treacherous ladder that led to the moment when the quiet audacity of betrayal could no longer hide. The day of the confrontation arrived with a tension I could almost taste, a quiet pressure that sat in my chest like the weight of iron. I had coordinated a virtual meeting with the bank, the realtor, and my lawyer. Everyone necessary to ensure that the evidence I had painstakingly collected would be seen and acknowledged in real time. The office lights glared softly on my screen, casting sharp shadows and creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The hum of my laptop fan blended with the faint scent of coffee in the room, grounding me as I prepared, reviewing notes, footage, and timelines for the 100th time. As I took a deep breath and clicked the link, the waiting interface opened like a theater curtain, revealing my dad and brother on the other end, faces calm and unsuspecting. The faint glow of their rooms illuminated their expressions as though nothing had changed, as though no betrayal lay beneath the surface. I felt a strange mix of anticipation and resolve stir within me, a quiet certainty that this was the moment all my careful observation and documentation had been leading toward. I started with calm clarity, narrating the situation with a precision that echoed the rhythm of my thoughts. I laid out the sequence of events step by step, the unauthorized emails, the messages to realtors, the showings held without my consent, and finally, the most damning piece of all, the camera footage. As I began to play it, the screen filled with the familiar walls of my house, the movement of my father and brother captured in a moment of betrayal. Their gestures, their discussions, the tablet in hand, it was all there, precise and undeniable, a visual record that could not be argued away. As the footage rolled on, I could sense the atmosphere shifting. The calm facade my dad and brother wore began to crack, their expressions morphing from confusion to realization. I felt a rush of vindication, a bittersweet mix of sorrow and relief flooding my senses. I had done what I set out to do. I had brought the truth into the light. In that moment, I understood that this confrontation was more than just a battle over my house. It was a fight for the integrity of our family, a reckoning that would either forge our bonds anew or shatter them completely. The storm I had feared had finally arrived, and I was ready to face it head-on. In the sleek conference room, framed by large glass windows and illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, an air of casual confidence filled the space. Initially, smiles danced across faces, their expressions light and almost amused. But as the digital frames advanced, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Details emerged, each with a clarity that felt almost surgical. Signatures forged, drafts scattered, discussions of buyers laced with deceit, all captured with meticulous timestamps. With every click of the mouse, I felt the tension in the room mount, a growing unease as the evidence turned from abstract to undeniable. My voice remained calm, a steady metronome in the face of encroaching chaos. I narrated the footage in measured tones, letting the visuals speak for themselves. The silence grew thick, palpable, suffocating, as the hum of electronics became a backdrop to the silent gasps of realization that echoed through the speakers. I watched as my father, once an imposing figure of authority, began to shrink before my eyes, the confidence that had always cloaked him unraveling into a pale stillness. My brother sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that were lost in a storm of shock. And the realtor, previously scribbling notes with a practiced ease, now stood rigid, eyes glued to the screen as the weight of the undeniable truth settled over them like a thick fog, obscuring the familiar landscape of our relationships. The energy in the room shifted palpably, the unspoken hierarchy I had always believed in crumbling under the weight of their own miscalculations. I could almost hear their thoughts swirling in the charged air. We miscalculated. We assumed absence was permission. We were wrong. It was a bitter truth that fell heavy between us. Then, my lawyer broke the thick silence, his voice calm but firm as he referenced the legal implications of their actions, the necessity for my consent, and the pile of documents that proved it had been shamelessly ignored. My own words echoed his sentiments, measured and clinical, but beneath the surface, I felt a surge of authority rising within me, a recognition of the power I now wielded. The ensuing conversation was a cacophony of fragmented excuses, each attempt to rationalize their actions falling flat against the mountain of evidence I had meticulously prepared. Their responses, stammered and disjointed, only served to underscore the audacity of their betrayal. The tension was a living thing, crackling in the air, as I bore witness to the unraveling of their facades. The reality of their actions laid bare before me. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of vindication and loss. The father I had looked up to, the brother I had trusted, now mere shadows of their former selves, stripped of their power and authority by their own greed. As the realization washed over them, I understood that we were forever changed. The room, once a familial sanctuary, had morphed into a battleground, our bonds tested by the stark reality of betrayal and the undeniable proof that had ensnared them in their own web of deceit. In the dim light of my cramped home office, shadows danced across the walls as the tension in the air thickened to an almost palpable weight. My heartbeat quickened with each tick of the clock, a steady reminder of the impending confrontation. I paused the video footage, my breath hitching in my throat, as the most incriminating frame flickered on the screen. It revealed the tablet displaying the draft contract, the unmistakable scrawl of signatures, and there it was, my father's hand, resting lightly on the edge of the counter, an almost casual legitimization of a transaction that had never been authorized. The silence that ensued was deafening, a pregnant pause heavy with acknowledgement. It was as if the very air around us waited with bated breath for what would come next. My heart pounded quietly, not with triumph, but with a profound sense of clarity. The spiral of chaos that had threatened to engulf me was now contained. I had the upper hand. With a calm authority, the bank officer on the call initiated a freeze on all accounts related to the property. His voice was steady, as he stated that no action could proceed without notarized verification from me. A formal, ironclad process that not only secured the house, but also reinforced the boundaries I had meticulously documented. I could feel the weight of the moment settle upon me, as if the universe had bent its will to acknowledge my resolve. Across the screen, my father and brother appeared pale and speechless, their faces drained of color as the gravity of their actions dawned on them, crystallizing in a way that no words could ever convey. The moment stretched on, heavy and slow, the virtual room suspended in time. Here in this strange digital realm, the weight of betrayal and exposure clashed against the quiet authority of my proof and documentation. They fumbled for explanations, but I knew it was futile. The record remained clear. The house could not be sold without my direct involvement, and any further attempts would be met with legal repercussions. The social payoff, the taut expressions, the sudden palpable stillness, was immediate and undeniable, a testament to the power of observation and preparation. I paused the footage once more, letting the replay wash over me like a soothing balm. There was a calm finality to the narrative of the moment, a reminder that this was not about confrontation for the sake of anger or revenge. It was about reclaiming control, asserting my boundaries, and demonstrating that trust is something that must be earned and maintained, not simply assumed. As I observed my father and brother, usually so confident in their roles within our family, now rendered silent, I felt a shift in the power dynamic. The balance tilted firmly in my favor, a realization dawning that I had not only prevented a grievous violation of trust, but had also established clear boundaries that could not be ignored. The meeting concluded with a formal acknowledgement from all parties. The transaction officially halted. I sat in my chair, a quiet awareness blooming within me, knowing that the house, the space I had fought so hard to secure, was once again firmly under my ownership and authority. The adrenaline of the moment lingered, a soft hum in the background as my laptop whirred gently, a reminder that I had stood my ground. I had carved out a space for myself, one that had been threatened, but now felt more solid and inviolable than ever. In the stillness of the world, a turning point unfolded, surreal yet precise, like the final stroke of a master painter on a vibrant canvas. For weeks, I had been an observer from the shadows, meticulously documenting each moment, each detail of the storm brewing under the surface. What began as a mere whisper of suspicion crescendoed into a confrontation that reverberated with the weight of consequence, a revelation that would shift the very foundations of my life. The days following that virtual confrontation were quiet, yet heavy with an unspoken tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. It was the kind of silence that made you acutely aware of every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of leaves outside the window, the distant hum of life continuing on without me. The bank had heightened their vigilance, freezing all accounts connected to the house, a fortress I had built with my own sweat, savings, and sacrifice. Every email sent, and every notarized letter penned felt monumental, a declaration that boundaries could not be crossed without consequence. Working closely with my lawyer, I cataloged every communication, every screenshot from my remote camera, a meticulous record of the weeks spent in silent observation. It was a transformation of chaos into order, a way to reclaim not just my home, but my sense of agency that had been quietly eroded. With each piece of documentation, I felt a stirring of authority return to my life. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was an architect of my own destiny. At home, a subtle shift altered the atmosphere, a palpable change that lingered like the scent of rain on dry earth. Conversations with my father and brother, once casual, now demanded structure, requiring a careful observation to avoid further misunderstandings. Visits to the house felt different. The air itself seemed charged with an unseen energy. They were now scheduled, monitored, and guided, each encounter meticulously orchestrated to ensure safety and understanding. It was protective, not punitive, a response to a breach that had shaken my trust in the very fabric of familial love. My father, who had always exuded confidence, now moved with a newfound caution. He understood that the shadows of assumed trust had been illuminated, revealing the potential for missteps even in the best of intentions. My brother, eager and impulsive, began to grasp that initiative without permission could bear significant risks. The lines of ownership and control were clear, no longer blurred by familiarity or absence. In my quest for security, I implemented additional safeguards, remote monitoring for ongoing transactions, double verification for all accounts, and regular documentation of every aspect of our shared life. Each measure was a protective barrier, a promise to myself that I would not be caught off guard again. And as I stood in the living room one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over everything, I felt a stirring of hope. I realized the house was more than just a structure. It was a testament to resilience, a sanctuary reclaimed from uncertainty. In that moment, amidst the changes that swirled around me, I knew that I had evolved, no longer just a passive observer. I was now an active participant in the story of my life. A life where authority and accountability walked hand in hand, where trust could be rebuilt, stronger than before. In the dim light of the late afternoon, the creaking wood of the old house echoed with the weight of unspoken words and past transgressions. Each step taken on the worn staircase reverberated through the still air, reminding me of the delicate balance I had to restore, a balance that had been shattered by those I had once trusted implicitly. As I sat in the quiet of the living room, the walls adorned with memories, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. The room was filled with the faint scent of aged wood and lingering traces of past laughter, but now it felt like a battleground of will and resilience. The emotional landscape I navigated was intricately layered, filled with reflections of moments I had overlooked, subtle signs that had seemed insignificant at the time. I could still hear my brother's casual remarks, the harmless jokes he made that now felt like whispers of intent. My father's gestures, once seen as caring nudges, now appeared as harbingers of overreach. Trust had been my foundation, but I learned the hard way that it needed the scaffolding of boundaries and verification. Love, I realized, was not a shield against self-interest. Each notarized document I signed, each account I froze, was a step towards reclaiming my space, a step towards emotional restoration. The confrontations that followed were not loud or dramatic. They were quiet exchanges filled with the weight of acknowledged betrayals. I could see the shift in my father and brother as they adapted to the new rhythm of respect. No longer guided by assumption, they began to observe carefully, their behaviors tempered by the formal accountability I had established. It was a strange dance, awkward at times, yet necessary for healing. As I settled into my newfound authority, I felt a quiet victory wash over me. It was a triumph that didn't scream, but instead hummed softly in the corners of the house, echoing through the spaces once filled with unease. I had learned that meticulous observation, diligent documentation, and patience could achieve what anger and confrontation often could not. The house, once a site of attempted overreach, transformed into a symbol of restored order and reclaimed authority. With each passing day, I found a profound emotional closure taking root. The betrayal had been addressed, boundaries reaffirmed, and a nuanced understanding of trust forged. Here, within these walls, I realized that maintaining boundaries was not a lack of faith. It was an act of preservation for the relationships and spaces I valued most. I came to understand how easily good intentions and unspoken rules could be manipulated in the absence of oversight. In the quiet moments that filled the house, I reflected on this journey, grateful for the lessons learned. Trust, I now knew, must coexist with vigilance, loyalty with accountability, ensuring that the spaces we cherish remain sanctuaries of safety and respect. As the world cautiously emerged from the shadows of uncertainty, I found myself standing at the threshold of a new normal, an echo of the life I once knew, yet forever altered. Every interaction felt charged with an invisible tension, a careful dance of awareness that reminded me of past transgressions. My heart raced as I mentally checked off my small routines, verifying documents, scanning messages, confirming intentions. Each task was a thread woven into the fabric of my disciplined vigilance, a protective cloak that allowed me to engage with my family without fear of past overreach. The scent of home lingered in the air, a blend of warm wood and the faintest hint of lavender from the garden my mother tended with love. I could hear the distant laughter of my brother and the soft murmur of my father's voice, both sounds grounding me in this sanctuary I fought so hard to secure. Yet, amid this serenity, I sensed an undercurrent of unresolved emotions, the remnants of rifts that seemed insurmountable during the chaos. But within this disciplined space, I discovered an opportunity for reconciliation. It was not about resentment. It was about recognition and protection. A conscious decision to uphold the values that had guided me through deployment: discipline, observation, and patience. I realized that the chaotic situation, which once felt overwhelming, was now a canvas for clarity, control, and intentional action. The cold reality of frozen accounts and the formal acknowledgement of my father and brother were merely the surface of a deeper resolution. I stepped into the living room, the familiar warmth of my home wrapping around me like a soft blanket. The walls, once witnesses to discord, now stood as strong sentinels of my resolve. I took a deep breath, feeling a calm certainty wash over me. Trust had been restored, but it was tempered by boundaries, an essential reclamation of space and agency. I understood now that the most powerful resolutions are not the loud, dramatic gestures often portrayed in the movies, but the steady, intentional, and complete actions that leave no room for doubt. In that quiet victory, I felt a profound exhale escape my lips, a release of the tensions that had built up inside me. I stood, looking around at the familiar faces of my family, each set of eyes reflecting a newfound understanding. My heart swelled with gratitude as I acknowledged the hard-earned, precise lessons learned through this journey. At that moment, I knew my sanctuary, my hard-won investment, was secure. The air felt lighter, the burdens of the past lifting like a mist in the morning sun. Relationships recalibrated, the lessons learned became a part of me, enduring and strong. As I settled into this space of peace, I whispered a silent promise to protect what was mine, ensuring that the integrity of my home and my life would remain uncompromised, forever marked by the quiet strength of intentionality.